Is Buddhism compatible with modern science, or is it just poetic mythology? The Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Either he attained enlightenment or he had an extreme prefrontal cortex activation. But what if both are true? I see two scenes. In one, a Buddhist monk sits motionless beneath a tree. His breath barely moves, his body is still, his awareness dissolved into formless silence. In the other, a neuroscientist watches an fMRI screen as the same monk's brain lights up, showing increased activity in attention, empathy, and sensory integration. These two scenes are two eyes, two ways of seeing the same reality. And the question that ignites between them is simple and dangerous. Are they seeing the same thing from different angles, or are they not even looking at the same world? The way of the Buddha versus the way of science. Buddhism is a path to the end of suffering. Science is a path to knowledge. One explores the mind from within, the other, the world from without. One begins with let go of concepts. The other begins with formulate a hypothesis and test it. They seem to move in opposite directions. But something changed in the 20th century when physicists read sutras. In the 1920s, quantum physics shattered classical assumptions. Electrons behaved as both wave and particle. Observation changed outcomes. The vacuum wasn't empty, it was a sea of potentiality. And many physicists began quoting Eastern mystics. Niels Bohr adopted the yin-yang symbol as his family coat of arms. Werner Heisenberg claimed Eastern philosophy gave him more insight into quantum reality than Western logic. David Bohm wrote about the implicate and explicate order, echoing the Buddhist view of the manifested and unmanifested. Even Einstein famously said, if there is any religion that could cope with modern scientific needs, it would be Buddhism. Buddhism as inner science. Some went even further. They claimed Buddhism is a science of the mind. Meditation is the inner laboratory. This gave rise to a movement, contemplative science. The Dalai Lama welcomed collaborations with neuroscientists. The Mind and Life Institute launched major studies on Buddhist monks and long-term meditators. Researchers observed changes in the brains of monks with 10,000 plus hours of meditation, diminished amygdala reactivity, less fear, growth in areas tied to empathy and attention. These weren't ideas anymore. They were measurable phenomena. But is this still Buddhism? And here, the tension begins, because when a scientist says enlightenment is a neuroplastic shift in synaptic firing, and a monk says enlightenment is the cessation of birth and death, are they really speaking about the same thing? Or are we simply translating myth into biology, leaving behind everything science can't quantify? The two truths. In Buddhism, there's a doctrine called the two truths: relative truth, language, form, conceptual world; ultimate truth, emptiness, the ineffable, the unborn. Science may be the tool of the first, but Buddhism aims for the second. What if we need both eyes, one turned inward, one outward, not to replace, but to see in depth? Because science without wisdom becomes weaponry. Wisdom without inquiry becomes superstition. The beginning of a dialogue. This is not a call to merge Buddhism and science. It's an invitation to respectful tension, to stand at the threshold where two worlds whisper to each other. Science seeks to understand the world. Buddhism seeks to be free from it. If they walk side by side, we must ask, are they leading us toward clarity or toward a deeper illusion? Science claims to be neutral, detached, and unbiased, but every equation is written by a mind with a history, the myth of the observer. Modern science prides itself on objectivity, the detached observer, the double-blind study, the numbers that speak louder than belief. But the Buddha would smile, because in his teaching, observation is never neutral. The very act of seeing already alters what is seen. This isn't mysticism, it's physics. Quantum mechanics tells us light behaves differently when observed. Subatomic particles don't have fixed positions until we measure them. Consciousness somehow enters the equation. And suddenly, the Buddhist teaching of interdependence doesn't sound so foreign. The hidden bias of the scientist science often claims to follow the data. But which data gets studied? Which questions get funding? Which results get published? Behind every study is a framework. Behind every experiment, a worldview. And that worldview, often shaped by Western materialism, assumes the mind is just the brain. Consciousness is an emergent property, not a fundamental force. Anything that can't be measured doesn't exist. But what if that's not truth? What if it's just cultural conditioning dressed as clarity? Meditation, the inner lab, enter meditation. Science asks, can we measure its effects? Heart rate, brain waves, stress levels. And yes, those are useful. But from the Buddhist perspective, that's like studying a poem by analyzing the ink. Meditation isn't about performance. It's not about alpha waves. It's about direct, intimate contact with reality, as it is, without filters. Can a lab ever capture that? Or does true awakening require stepping outside the lab altogether? Is science the new religion? Some say science replaced religion, that it freed us from superstition. But ask this, who do we trust more than scientists today? Whose words are treated as gospel? Whose studies decide what's real or acceptable? Has science become the new priesthood, just without the robes? And if so, is that true understanding or just another form of authority? Two ways of knowing Buddhism speaks of prajna, wisdom beyond concept, not intellect, not analysis, a knowing that is wordless, immediate, and embodied. Science seeks truth through separation, by breaking things apart. Buddhism seeks truth through union, by dissolving separation. These aren't enemies, they're complementary modes of inquiry, but they must know their limits. The danger of mistaking the map. Science is powerful, but it builds maps, not the territory. A brain scan can show you regions of compassion lighting up, but it can't feel compassion. It can measure calm, but it can't taste silence. Data is not awakening. Information is not liberation. And when we confuse the two, we lose the path entirely. Returning to the question, so is Buddhism compatible with science? Not if science refuses mystery, not if it insists that what is real must be seen, measured, replicated, but if science can soften, if it can approach the mind with humility as something not yet fully known, then yes, the two can walk together. One maps the world, the other unmakes the illusion of a self walking through it. I think, therefore I am. But Buddhism says, you think, therefore the illusion of I arises, the Western self. In the West, the self is sacred. We build identities like cathedrals. I am my memories. I am my desires. I am my trauma. I am my story. Modern psychology, especially since Freud, has treated the self as a thing, a structure to understand, a system to heal, a center to strengthen. But Buddhism never agreed. The Buddha said, there is no self. There never was. There never will be. Not in the body, not in the thoughts, not even in the soul. In the five aggregates and the illusion machine. Instead of a self, Buddhism offers the five skandhas: form, body, sensation, perception, mental formations, consciousness. These constantly arise and fall like waves, and the illusion of self is just the habit of clinging to their movement. You don't have a self, you have a habit of misidentifying process as person. This sounds radical, almost insane, but then neuroscience walked in and confirmed the suspicion. Neuroscience and the modular mind. In recent decades, cognitive science has shattered the myth of a unified self. Research shows the brain is modular. Different parts handle different tasks. Decisions are made before you become aware of them. The you that claims to be in control is often just a narrator after the fact. Neurologist David Eagleman said, the conscious mind is like a broom closet in the mansion of the brain. There is no central self, no inner CEO, just a story emerging from the chaos, which sounds a lot like anatta, the Buddhist doctrine of no self, the default mode network, the self-making machine. In neuroscience, there's a brain network called the default mode network, DMN. It's most active when You're daydreaming, remembering the past, worrying about the future, thinking about yourself. In other words, it's the engine of ego. And guess what meditation does? It quiets the DMN. Long-term meditators show reduced activity in the self-referential areas of the brain. Less DMN equals less self-clinging. Less self-clinging equals less suffering. When science meets sutra, science doesn't say there is no self in a religious sense, but it does show the self is a construct, a process, a useful hallucination, and Buddhism simply agrees, but adds this. Now that you see it's a hallucination, can you let it go, not just intellectually, but experientially? The risk of reductionism. But beware, science might say, no self is just a brain function. But Buddhism isn't describing chemicals, it's describing freedom. No self in Buddhism isn't a diagnosis, it's a doorway, a way to break the trance of clinging, a way to love without possession, to live without fear of loss. It's not that you don't exist, it's that what you thought was you never needed to. The emotional objection. Here comes the protest. But if there's no self, who loves, who suffers, who seeks awakening? It feels like a void, a death. But in Buddhism, it's a liberation, because when the self is seen through, the walls fall, the stories lose grip, compassion flows more freely, because there's no me to protect. And neuroscience supports this too. Studies show meditators are more empathetic, not less, more grounded, more resilient. No self doesn't kill the heart, it frees it, returning to the core. So, does neuroscience confirm Buddhism? Not fully. Science can point to the illusion of self, but only practice can pierce it. Science explains. Buddhism liberates. One offers maps, the other dissolves the need for maps, and between them, something miraculous becomes possible. A new way of knowing, not as someone, not from a place, but as awareness itself, vast, clear, and free. Can karma be measured? Everything happens for a reason, they say. But what if that reason isn't divine, but psychological, or neurological, or just projection? Karma, the law beyond law. In traditional Buddhism, karma is a moral law of the universe, not imposed by a god, not written in a book, but as natural as gravity. Every action has a consequence. Every thought plants a seed. Every word ripples through the fabric of reality. You are the heir to your karma, said the Buddha. Whatever you do, of body, speech, or mind, you inherit the result. Sounds noble, but modern minds immediately ask, where's the proof? The scientific challenge. Science demands measurement. We can track mass. We can calculate speed. We can isolate variables. But karma? Where's the unit of measurement? Where's the controlled study? Can you scan karma in an MRI? Can you detect it in the bloodstream? Can you prove beyond doubt that a kind act today leads to peace tomorrow? Number, you can't. At least, not yet. Is karma just cause and effect? Some argue that karma is just cause and effect. Do good, feel good. Do harm, live with guilt. It's psychology, not metaphysics. Indeed, neuroscience shows altruistic acts activate reward centers. Guilt creates stress responses. Chronic hate damages the immune system. So maybe karma is just internal feedback. But traditional karma isn't just about feelings. It's about consequences beyond this life. Rebirth, cosmic balance. That's where the science breaks. The rebirth problem. Buddhism links karma to rebirth, but science has no mechanism for this. The brain dies, the body decays, and consciousness, most scientists say, it dies with the brain. Yet, there are studies, controversial, yes, but persistent. Children with past life memories, unexplained phobias, regressions under hypnosis. Dr. Ian Stevenson studied thousands of such cases. He found birthmarks matching fatal wounds of alleged past lives. He documented names, places, details a child shouldn't know. Is it proof? Number, is it interesting? Absolutely. Science doesn't accept it, but it also can't explain it. Karma and complexity. Maybe karma is not linear. Maybe it's not, you lied, so your tire popped. Maybe it's a web, vast, tangled, and subtle. Modern science understands complex systems, climate ecosystems, social dynamics. These involve countless variables. Small actions ripple unpredictably. Maybe karma is like that, not law in the courtroom sense, but law in the sense of gravity, always operating, but not always obvious. You may not feel the consequence today, but the world shifts, even if you never see it. Karma as attention. What you focus on grows. This is now backed by neuroscience. Neural pathways strengthen with use. Cognitive biases shape perception. Emotional habits become default states. So if you act with greed, you reinforce greed. If you act with compassion, you strengthen compassion. In this sense, karma is self-shaping, not magic, not fate, just the mind sculpting itself moment by moment, the seduction of moral justice. Here's the danger. We want karma to be real because we want justice. We want to believe the wicked will suffer, the kind will flourish. No act goes unpunished or unrewarded, but Buddhism warns, don't cling even to karma. Karma isn't cosmic revenge. It's not a scoreboard. It's a tool for awakening. Once clinging dissolves, karma ends. The arahant is said to be beyond karma, not because they escaped morality, but because they no longer generate the craving that fuels rebirth. Science can't measure karma, but it might validate its effects. Can karma be measured? Not like mass, not like blood pressure, but its effects on character, on perception, on society are observable. Compassionate people are healthier. Generosity correlates with happiness. Mindful living improves cognitive function. So maybe science doesn't need to prove karma metaphysically. Maybe it only needs to confirm living with awareness, compassion, and discipline works, and that might be enough. Write your questions in the comments. You give me a like and a follow. I'll give you an answer. Does enlightenment have a brain signature? What if awakening isn't a spiritual mystery, but a neurological event? And what if it's neither? The search for the enlightened brain science loves to locate. We locate pain in the nociceptors. We locate vision in the occipital cortex. We locate memory in the hippocampus. So naturally we ask, where is enlightenment in the brain? Is there a signature, a pattern, a unique configuration that marks the awakened mind? Neuroscientists have tried to find out, and what they've discovered is fascinating and troubling. The monks in the MRI. In recent years, elite Buddhist practitioners have entered fMRI machines. These are not weekend meditators. These are monks with 10,000 to 50,000 plus hours of formal training. Some began meditating at age 5. Some live in seclusion for decades. And the data? During deep states of compassion meditation, their brains show exceptionally high gamma wave activity, increased coherence across regions, unusual synchronization between attention and emotion centers. Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin called it neuroplasticity beyond anything previously imagined. Some began to whisper, is this the brain on enlightenment? The default mode network again. We met the default mode network, DMN, in part 3, the self-making machine. It turns out long-term meditators show dramatic suppression of the DMN. Their brains show less self-referential thinking, less wandering, less me, me, me. This lines up eerily well with Buddhism's description of no self, anatta. So far, so good. But then comes the problem. Correlation is not realization. Just because a brain shows gamma waves doesn't mean the person is awakened. Just because a person shows low DMN activity doesn't mean they're free from suffering. We can see brain activity, but we can't see liberation, because enlightenment, in the Buddhist sense, isn't about brain states. It's about the end of craving, the cessation of clinging, the release of identification. No scan can capture that. No electrode can confirm that. Can machines replicate awakening? Let's go deeper. If a brain state correlates with enlightenment, could we reproduce it? Could we stimulate the right areas? Could we train AI to mimic it? Could a machine become awakened? This is not science fiction anymore. Neurotechnology companies are exploring non-invasive brain stimulation for altered states. Some claim we may soon induce deep meditative states on demand. But here's the question. If the state is induced, is it still enlightenment, or is it just the echo of an experience without the insight? Enlightenment as unmeasurable Buddhism warns us not to cling to jhanas, high meditative states. Even bliss, radiance, or boundless peace are still conditioned. The real awakening is not a feeling, it's not a brainwave, it's the falling away of illusion. How do you measure the falling away of illusion? You can't, because the moment it's captured, it becomes a thing, and enlightenment is precisely the freedom from thingness, the Western hunger for evidence. Western minds want proof. Show me the scan, show me the data, show me the graph. But Buddhism says proof is not the path. Insight is. The Buddha refused to answer metaphysical questions. He spoke only of what leads to cessation. So perhaps the obsession with enlightenment as brain signature is already a veering off the path, a quiet revolution. Still, something is happening. Science is listening to the contemplatives. Meditation is no longer dismissed. Mind and matter are in dialogue. But the greatest truths may not be found in images of the brain. They may still be found where the Buddha said they would, in this very body, in this very breath, in this moment of undistracted seeing. The physics of emptiness. Everything is empty, says the Buddha. Everything is probability, says the physicist. Are they whispering the same truth from opposite ends of reality? The Buddhist void. In Mahayana Buddhism, the central truth is shunyata, emptiness, not nihilism, not meaninglessness, but the recognition that all things are interdependent, lack inherent existence, are not what they appear to be. A cup exists only because of clay, a potter, heat culture. The need to drink, no object, no self, stands alone. Everything arises in relation. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. The scientific echo quantum physics, the strange ghostly science beneath all things, seems to echo this. It tells us particles are not things, but probabilities. Until measured, they exist in superposition, not here or there, but both, or neither. Observation changes outcome. Heisenberg said, "What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning." Just like in Buddhism, the observer is not outside the system, the particle that isn't take the electron. In classical physics, it's a tiny ball. In quantum physics, it's a cloud of possibilities until you look, and then, only then, does it choose a state. But the act of observation isn't neutral. It collapses the wave. It co-creates the event. So is the world real when you're not looking? Quantum physics doesn't know. Buddhism smiles, because it's been asking the same question for 2,500 years. The collapse of things, shunyata, teaches what you see is shaped by karma, perception, conditioning, language, desire. You don't see the thing, you see a projection, a mental construction reinforced by habit. And now physics joins in. The thing is an illusion. There is no thing, only relations, probabilities, and collapses. The observer is the observed. Buddhism dismantles the subject-object duality. There is no solid seer behind the eyes, no doer behind the thought, no self separate from the world. This matches the quantum view too. Entanglement shows particles across the galaxy are non-locally connected. Reality is not a collection of things, but a vast web of interaction. You are not a separate point looking out. You are part of the field itself. The trouble with metaphor. But be careful. It's tempting to say, quantum physics proves Buddhism. It doesn't. Quantum physics is math. Buddhism is liberation. Their overlap is poetic, not empirical. They echo each other, but walk different paths. And trying to make Buddhism into science might strip it of its soul. Emptiness is not nothingness. One common mistake: thinking emptiness equals void equals nothing equals meaninglessness. But in Buddhism, emptiness is full of potential, like space that allows movement, like silence that allows music, like a blank page that allows poetry. Quantum physics also reveals a universe bursting with uncertainty, teeming with potential, alive in its indeterminacy. So both traditions point not to meaninglessness, but to radical openness, awakening without matter. Finally, shunyata is not a theory. It's not something to debate. It's something to see, to realize, to rest in without clinging. Physics can describe the void, but Buddhism invites you to enter it, and in doing so, discover there is no one here to be afraid. Just this: breath, sound, movement, awareness, empty, interconnected, and free. Why science can't measure awakening? If it can't be measured, is it real? But what if the most real things are precisely those that cannot be measured? The hunger for measurement. Science is a language of measurement. It has mapped galaxies, split atoms, decoded genomes, simulated consciousness. So it's no surprise we ask, can enlightenment be scanned? Can awakening be verified? We want proof, charts, peer-reviewed certainty. But Buddhism responds with a quiet smile, because it knows. Awakening is not something to see, it's something to become. Awakening is a shift, not a state. You can't catch enlightenment in a bottle. You can't capture it in a graph, because awakening is not a state of mind. It's a shift in identity from I am this to there is no I. It's not about what you experience. It's about what you no longer cling to. No lab can detect this shift because it's the end of the observer, not just a change in observation. Science needs objects, but awakening dismantles the subject. Science begins with separation, subject here, object there, measurement in between, but awakening dissolves that. In deep realization, there is no subject, no object, no gap between, just this, which leaves science speechless. The fallacy of the Enlightenment scanner. Imagine a machine that claims this person is awakened, that one is not. But who would design such a machine? And based on what? Brain waves, gamma activity, default mode network suppression. We've seen those. They're suggestive, but they're not liberation, because someone could have all the right brain patterns and still be full of ego, or someone could show no markers and yet live in perfect peace. Awakening is not a performance. It's not a show. It's freedom from all roles, even the role of being awakened. The problem of replication: science demands replication. Repeat the experiment, get the same result. But enlightenment is not a formula. It's not plug and play. One person awakens through silence, another through trauma, another through devotion. The path is not linear. It's intimate, alive, responsive to karma. There's no control group for the ineffable, the paradox of proof. Even if you could measure awakening, would it still be awakening? Because the very act of trying to prove it is already a clinging, and clinging is the very thing awakening releases. The moment you seek it, it slips. The moment you grasp it, it disappears. The awakened do not need to know they are awakened. That knowing would be another mask. They just are, radiant, empty, free. The mirror metaphor. Buddhism often uses the metaphor of a mirror. The awakened mind is like a mirror, clear, reflective, unstained. It sees all, but clings to nothing. It shines, but claims no light. Science wants to study the mirror, but the mirror can't be seen as an object. It only reveals itself in its function, and that function is love, wisdom, freedom from fear. The awakened one doesn't prove anything. Their life is the proof. 8. What science can still offer. This isn't a dismissal of science. Far from it. Science can show how meditation affects the brain, reveal the benefits of mindfulness, offer tools for well-being. But science ends where insight begins. The Buddha never asked us to believe blindly. He asked us to look inwardly, not to verify awakening, but to live it. And in that living, all questions dissolve. Buddhism speaks of truth beyond thought. Science seeks truth through thought. Can these ever meet, or are they destined to misunderstand each other forever? where the two worlds touch. Let's begin with what's undeniable. Science and Buddhism both value direct observation, reject blind belief, seek to alleviate suffering. Both speak of impermanence. Both challenge naive realism. Both respect the unfolding of causes and conditions. That's not nothing. That's a sacred overlap. But now the deeper divergence begins. The limits of measurement science is a tool, a magnificent one, but it is a tool of objectivity, of replication, of third person verification. Buddhism is not. It is first person revolution, not about what you can measure, but what you can let go of. Science tells you if it can't be seen, it's not real. Buddhism tells you if it can be seen, it's not the self. These aren't just different languages, they are different realities. The crisis of consciousness. Modern science still doesn't know what consciousness is, where it comes from, why it exists at all. Some scientists say it's just an illusion. But Buddhism says, illusion of what and to whom? Consciousness in Buddhism is not a side effect. It's the stage, the mirror, the field. Trying to explain it away is like trying to bite your own teeth. What science fears, Buddhism embraces. Science avoids subjectivity like fire. It sees it as bias, contamination, noise. Buddhism enters it, watches it, dismantles it, not to escape the mind, but to see through the mind, not to conquer nature, but to dissolve the illusion of separateness. Beyond mythology, beyond mechanism, the question was, is Buddhism just beautiful mythology? Number, because mythology is symbolic and Buddhism is experiential. It's not a story you believe, it's a reality you uncover. But is it science? Number, because it doesn't seek knowledge for control, it seeks insight for release. It's not hypothesis and experiment, it's suffering and the end of suffering. The real question. Maybe we've asked the wrong thing all along. Not, is Buddhism compatible with science? But, can a human being live with clarity, compassion, and freedom in a world driven by uncertainty, technology, and distraction? And there, Buddhism answers softly and clearly, yes, but not through belief, not through debate, and not through waiting for the next peer-reviewed paper, through practice, through silence, through seeing. Two wings, one flight. The Buddha once said, wisdom and compassion are like two wings of a bird. Science might be one wing, Buddhism the other. Together, they could fly, not by proving each other, but by serving the awakening of humanity. The last silence. In the end, the Buddha was asked dozens of metaphysical questions, and to most, he remained silent, not because he didn't know, but because he knew. The answer is not in the words, it is in the seeing, in the letting go, in the flame that burns quietly, yet never dies. So don't just ask whether Buddhism and science align. Ask what part of you is still waiting for the answer, and let that too dissolve.